Now it's live. This is the Building Background Knowledge, Islam and Palestine with Wisconsin Biographies webinar. We are coming to you live right now, but you might also be watching this in the future on YouTube. Either way, you are in for a treat. We have so much to share with you, and you are going to walk away with a brain filled with knowledge and insight and great feelings about the world and what you can go off to teach people and your students, your family, your friends alike. My name is Michael Hartwell. I am a 3rd through 12th grade education engagement specialist with PBS Wisconsin. And a little bit about PBS Wisconsin. We make free to use standards aligned Wisconsin focused media for grades K through 12. That includes videos, games, interactive content, educator guides, and more. In addition to all the great media that we produce for educators around the state of Wisconsin, we also host free professional development, kind of like what you're seeing right now. And today, you are tuned in to learn a little bit about our Wisconsin Biographies collection, specifically our brand new feature, which we'll get to in a minute. But before we get there, I want to give you a quick overview of what exactly the Wisconsin Biographies collection entails. An overview basically is that it's free educational media resources that bring the stories of notable Wisconsinites of the past to life for learners today. There's probably a number of these people who you might be familiar with, but I would bet there's a lot of them who you don't know. These are folks that maybe didn't get the notoriety they deserved, and so the collection is meant to focus on those people that have done great things in Wisconsin. Sometimes their legacy has been within the state, other times it has gone global, international, etc. The collection is geared towards grades 3 through 6, but these are great biographies to share and scaffold up or down. Based on different interests and skill levels, we find them to be really useful outside of that grade range as well. They are mostly aligned with English language arts, social studies, and environmental literacy curriculum, but also make some unit connections, do some cross-curricular strategizing with some of your fellow teachers and colleagues, and we're sure you can find a lot of great uses for this. And then lastly, with our newest feature, which we'll be talking about today, we are now up to 18 Wisconsin biographies that are currently available. And speaking of that newest feature, I am absolutely delighted to introduce our latest biography on Mahmoud Othman Atta. We're going to take the next 7 minutes and we're going to watch the beautiful animated video for Mahmoud. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about his life and his legacy and learn a little bit more about where he comes from and his faith and the impact that he had in the great state of Wisconsin. So without further ado, let's watch this incredible video.
Mahmoud Othman Atta felt like the happiest man in Milwaukee. His family was together, and his 3rd child had just been born.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
It was the summer of 1967. Mahmoud and his family were spending the year together in Wisconsin, visiting from their home in Palestine. For many years, Mahmoud had been living in the U.S. to work and send money back home to his family. So getting to spend so much time together was really something special. But while they were still in the hospital, Mahmoud's wife saw images on the TV that immediately caused her to worry. Things that would turn her family's life upside down. Israeli soldiers were occupying parts of Palestine, including their hometown of Al-Bideh, as part of fighting between Israel and several Arab nations. Mahmoud's wife knew this was very bad for them. And Mahmoud knew this too. What would this mean for his family? When would they be able to return? Who would take care of their house, their relatives, their things? The war was over quickly, lasting only 6 days, but fighting had been brutal. And with Israeli soldiers still occupying Palestine, it wasn't safe for Mahmoud and his family to return. What if they could never go back? Mahmoud had an idea. If he and his family couldn't return to Palestine, they would try their best to make a home in Milwaukee. Mahmoud already knew the city well. His father had been coming to Milwaukee from Palestine since before his birth. He worked as a peddler, traveling and selling all sorts of goods. This helped him support his family back home and was a common job for many of the Arab immigrants who came to the U.S. in the early 20th century. When Mahmoud was a teenager, his dad wanted him to broaden his experiences, so he brought him to Milwaukee and enrolled him in West Division High School. Mahmoud was a good student, and he ran on the school's track team and won medals. But before he graduated, his father died very suddenly. He was thousands of miles from his home in Palestine, away from his mother and siblings. What would he do? Luckily, Mahmoud wasn't alone. He had a small community of people he could count on. Arab Christians and Muslims had been coming to the United States for decades, and they helped look out for each other. Mahmoud also had an uncle who watched over him. He managed to finish high school, start college, and then join the U.S. Army and spend time serving as a medic, all before returning to Palestine to marry and start his own family. Now, just a few years later, he knew he could make things work once again. Mahmoud was a Muslim. His religion, Islam, was very important to him. For him and Muslims all over the world, part of their religion means praying 5 times a day, facing the direction of the Kaaba shrine in Mecca. Doing this in their home in Milwaukee was a way to feel connected to Muslims everywhere. Being connected to the local community was also important to Mahmoud. He and his family regularly welcomed people from all over Milwaukee to join their gatherings. Milwaukee was starting to feel like home, but there was something missing. There was no official place for all the city's Muslims to gather together and worship. Mahmoud began reaching out to other Muslims in Milwaukee and forming connections. Many were Black Americans who were new to the religion. Segregation was a big problem in the city, so Mahmoud built bridges by connecting with Black Muslims. He taught about Islam, led prayers, and sometimes was even asked to pick Muslim names for babies. Now Milwaukee was really starting to feel like home, but something was still missing. They needed a mosque. Mahmoud knew that a mosque was essential for their community. A mosque was more than just a special place for prayer. It was a gathering space that could serve as a center for education, social activism, volunteer work, and so much more. But how could anyone take on the huge cost and work of building a new mosque? The answer was right in front of him. He could help make it happen by bringing people together. In 1982, 2 Muslim groups in Milwaukee decided to combine their resources to buy an old school building. Over the next few years, the old building filled with the sounds of prayers, of children laughing, of families talking. The Islamic community became more diverse with each passing year, and in the end, they built a new mosque for Muslims all across Milwaukee and beyond. For Mahmoud Othman Atta, this was a dream turned into reality. Mahmoud eventually was able to go back to see his extended family in Palestine, and over the years, he would return whenever he could. But by that point, he had a new home, one with his family, his community, and his mosque, right here in Wisconsin.
Okay, I hope you are cheering at home. for that incredible new biography. That was a lot to pack in just about 7 minutes. So some of you might be thinking, oh, I'd like to know more, or I'd like to review. Obviously, you can go back and watch that video whenever you want. But in addition to that video, the landing page for the Mahmoud Othman Atta biography includes a whole bunch of other really, really great, valuable resources for teaching and learning. You can see that we have sort of the blurb, the summarized version of the story, along with some big questions to consider. You'll find that right at the top of the landing page. And as you scroll down, you'll find there's an image gallery, there's a biography book, also at the very bottom. And then there is a related educator guide as well, which is going to include a lot of other really, really helpful resources. And we're going to be talking about these throughout today's interview as well, which it's almost time to get to. But before we do, I'm going to pass it to my friend David, who's going to tell you a little bit about the production process for this great feature.
Hi, so I'm David Baffa, and I'm a producer in the education department, and I was the producer on this project, on this biography. I really want to mention that this is a deeply collaborative project, like all our biographies. We strive for an inclusive production model that gives agency to the people and the communities who have a connection to the story. In this case, we were lucky to work with Mahmoud's children, as well as two of our advisors, and Hannah Othmal, our illustrator, is a Muslim American. So in all aspects, we're trying to engage with the community and again, use this inclusive production model to make sure we're giving voice to the people who we're featuring. So with that, I want to actually turn it over to Janan, who will talk a little bit about her background and her role and contribution to this project.
Thank you so much, David. I'm really thrilled to be part of this. This project obviously started probably about 2 years ago with the initial PBS team looking to apply for a grant to undertake this, and we worked closely with them, and over the course of these 2 years, a lot of interaction between all aspects of the project. I am actually the daughter of Mahmoud Othman Atta. I'm the eldest child, and I am currently the founder and executive director of the Islamic Resource Center on Milwaukee's South Side, and also the Milwaukee Muslim Women's Coalition. And we are a resource facility helping educators and others gather whatever information and items that they need, including cultural items, to better understand the broader Muslim community. And I think, Muna, you are important part of the team here.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you to all of the folks in the crowd who've joined us today. I know we have Muslim teachers and non-Muslim teachers from all around the state. Welcome. Thank you for being here today. My name is Muna Al-Gaithi. I'm an early learning engagement specialist on the PBS Wisconsin education team. And I love my job. I love getting to work with people all around the state and get to share out about the wonderful resources that PBS offers educators. And so we're going to go ahead and get started with our interview today. David and I will be interviewing Janan. And just so you know, our interview questions are actually guided by some of the stills from the animated video that we just watched. So while we ask the questions to Janan, you'll see photos from the video, and you'll also see some real-time site navigation where you can access some of the resources after our webinar today. So the slide deck, as well as anything that you'll need to use these resources in your classroom, will be emailed out to you if you registered after the webinar, inshallah. So let's get started. So much of Islam is misunderstood or misrepresented in traditional media. I would argue that this animation and this project is far from traditional media. Let's start off with the basics for those who are on the call today who want to learn some of the basics of Islam. What would you say the core tenets of Islam are?
Well, thank you, Muna. And I do agree that unfortunately there's a lot of misinformation and lack of information about Islam and Muslims. And so that's why this project is incredibly important, because it has so many resource materials. I think that if you were going to identify the single most important aspect of what, you know, makes a person Muslim or why they are Muslim, it's the belief in one God. The idea that Prophet Muhammad is the final messenger of God after, of course, you know, a long line of prophets and messengers. What's also important is that the Muslim concept of God is a very strictly monotheistic concept. So for Muslims, God does not beget, God is not begotten, God is not a male or a female. God cannot be put in finite terms. Basically, God is beyond human description. And so this is the probably one of the most important aspects. And this is in fact what makes a person Muslim. The idea, the single belief in the one God, and that Prophet Muhammad is a final messenger of God. But again, there are many other aspects or core tenets of the belief in the prophets that were sent as messengers to God, belief in angels, belief in the revelations that were sent to the different prophets and messengers, belief in a day of judgment, a final day. These are all central to Muslim belief.
Thank you for sharing that recap and connecting it to the other Abrahamic faiths, because I think a lot of people don't know about that. I know when I was growing up, people were so surprised to hear that we believe in Jesus too, just in a different way than Christians might. And so thank you for providing that background.
Yeah, and you know, I think that's one of the most important aspects that many people here do not realize, is really the idea that Islam is part of the Abrahamic tradition. So we share a lot. We look to Abraham as the father, and we look at the other faiths that came through the Abrahamic faiths as faiths that were sent by God. And so, as you mentioned, the idea that, you know, we believe in Jesus and we believe in Moses, and the idea that there's an entire chapter in the Quran that is dedicated to Mary, you know, and is called Maryam. These are a lot of things that people are not aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the video that we watched in the beginning, there was a short clip that showed the Kaaba, right? The little black box in the Saudi Arabia. Can you talk about what that is and why that's important to Muslims?
Yeah, that's the single holiest site for Muslims. It is the Kaaba. It's in modern day Saudi Arabia, but you know, Saudi Arabia is a political country. It's just, it happens to be what is in modern day Saudi Arabia. But this is very important because for Muslims, we believe that the Kaaba is the first house that was built on earth for the worship of one God. It was built by Prophet Abraham and by his eldest son, Ishmael, from where Muslims then came, and Prophet Muhammad eventually was a descendant. And what's unique about it is, you know, a lot of times people think, well, what is that? Is that where Prophet Muhammad is buried, or what is unique about it? There's absolutely nothing in that structure. It's very symbolic. It's symbolic of this house that was built for the worship of one God. And what's unique is that all Muslims all over the world, 5 times a day, when they turn to pray, they turn to face the Kaaba. So wherever they are in the world, they are turning to face the Kaaba, symbolically showing that we worship the God of Abraham.
That was such a beautiful way to summarize the importance of the Kaaba. Thank you for that. And, you know, there are many terms that we might use today, or that you might have heard that you might not be familiar with. And PBS Wisconsin has you in mind. One of the resources you can find on our website when you're looking through this biography is a key terms document. And so you can find this to learn about some of those different terms. Islam, Muslim, mosque, etc. So be sure to check that out later on when you're looking into some of these resources. And I'll pass it to David for the next question.
Thank you. So In the video, something else we learn is that a mosque is where Muslims worship. In your father's life, there were a number of ways, very important ways, that he contributed to the history of Muslims in Milwaukee, but ultimately we decided to focus on his work helping to establish the city's first mosque open to all Muslims. Do you want to talk a little bit about why we made that decision?
Yeah, I think that, as we were discussing it, we had talked about the importance for practicing Muslims, the importance of faith and the importance of a mosque as a central place where people gather for prayer, and particularly for the Friday congregational prayer, which is a requirement. And this was something that was incredibly important to my father. I think that until we actually had a mosque in Milwaukee, he never really felt that he was at home, because there was something that was significantly missing as part of his the practice of his faith. I remember that as being a young person, there was at the time a space on the north side of Milwaukee that was a school, Claire Muhammad School, that was run by some of the African American and Black Muslims. It was a very small community, and so we would go there and we would pray there. And my father also, all of the time, he would bring people, especially during Ramadan. We have Ramadan that's going to be coming up soon. He would bring them to our house to pray in congregation, but there was never really that big structure, that big mosque. And even in fact, I still remember during our when we would be in Ramadan and we would have our special prayers, we would do them in the living room of our house. And sometimes some of the Muslims in the community would come and drive over, and we would just meet in the living room. And that's how small the community was. And when we would have, as a young child, even up to probably being in middle school, when we would have our holiday prayers at the end of Ramadan, they would, the community would rent a space at a hotel, like a Holiday Inn at the time, and we would have maybe 100 or 150 people that would go ahead and be there for our holiday prayer, which is such a significant difference now. After now my children are grown, and we have probably 9 mosques in the Metro Milwaukee area. And when we have our holiday prayers, besides the prayers that take place in the mosque and at the convention center downtown, you probably have about 16,000 that are participating in the holiday prayer. So that's a big, significant difference.
That's awesome. Do you want to talk briefly about any of the important holy sites in Palestine for Muslims, so for your father?
Yeah, and this is also, I think, why it was so important. My father, as growing up in Palestine, he was within very short distance, able to go to Al-Aqsa compound. So this is the 3rd holiest sites for all Muslims in the world. And so right behind Muna there is the Dome of the Rock. So there's the Dome of the Rock, and there's also Al-Aqsa Mosque, and both of them together make up Al-Aqsa compound. And this is very, very significant for all Muslims. And so, hearing the call to prayer from the minarets and being able every Friday to go to Al-Aqsa Mosque to pray, this is not something that you can forget, and it's not something that is, you can replace. But at least having a mosque in Milwaukee to be able to hear the call to prayer and to pray in congregation was really very, very important. But for all Muslims, Al-Aqsa compound and Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock are something that are vital to our faith and something that we will always be attached to.
That's great. Before we move on, I do just want to note, so we've got these beautiful images of the mosque in the video, of course, but to complement this, we also have some primary source artifacts that you can look at with students or on your own. So there are photos of the actual mosque when they first purchased the buildings. This is a school that they purchased back in, I think it was 1983. And there are images in the image gallery. There's an image of the mosque today, which is greatly expanded and incorporates in its structure that original school building, which is really cool and I think really special. But yeah, I will pass it back to Muna now.
You, David. So going back to Palestine, one of the things that the video discusses is the issues that were happening back then that impacted your family and your father that are still going on today. I know that the Palestinian, these issues were some of the first things that I became passionate about when I was young and leaning into my activism. And so there are so many Palestinians I know who have been directly impacted by this, and I have never met a Palestinian who hasn't been. And so why do you think it's important to name Palestine and talk about Palestinian resilience and resistance in classrooms?
Well, I think this is what's so exciting about this project, and for those of you that don't know, that are watching all of this kind of embroidery that is making up the screens, this is a very typical Palestinian excuse me, Palestinian embroidery. But like you said, Muna, this is an issue that's been going on for 75 years. I think a lot of times in our country, people don't know the history of what created the conflict. This was after the World War II and the Holocaust. It was with the Great Britain, you know, rather than giving reparations and making accommodations for the Jewish victims of the Holocaust, the United Nations, pushed by Great Britain, decided that they were going to create a new homeland for the victims of the Holocaust, and they were going to divide Palestine. The problem is that there were already people living in Palestine, and so what happened is that over 400 cities were absolutely exterminated, Palestinian cities, and the Palestinian people became refugees in order to accommodate. And so, and then there were additional wars that took place as well, that took more land from the Palestinians. And so in the United States, the reason why it's so important is that all over the world, everyone knows, you know, the majority of countries and people know about the Palestinian issue. But in the United States, we have a very strong lobby that has really worked hard to prevent even the mention of Palestine. Many people might not even know that although the Palestinians are the longest languishing refugees in the world, the United States to this day refuses to allow them to be considered as refugees, because then you have to address, well, who made them refugees, you know? And so it's important, I think, and it's become doubly important these days after Black Lives Matter, after a recognition that, you know, those that have faced oppression or colonization or extermination, their stories need to be told. You know, there's a new understanding about the indigenous folks being you know, having their story told, and the Palestinians are also believe it's important for their country to be named, for their story to be told, and for a recognition of the rich and vibrant culture that they have. Anytime, you know, too often within the mainstream media, you see Palestinians, all you see are individuals throwing stones at tanks or something of this sort. You don't see the rich, you know, who brought you hummus and falafel and tabbouleh and all of these things. You know, the next time you guys want to eat this great food, thank the Palestinians for it, you know? So it's really important for us to recognize the culture and the history of my people. And I think that, you know, one of the things that is really, really important is that the Palestinians will not forget Palestine. They will not back down on their rights as Palestinians, and they will not allow their culture to be forgotten. And so I think that by allowing their story to be told, that's central to what the recognition now is about allowing the different narratives to be presented by the people that have experienced them.
If we were in a physical space right now, I would have just done a slow clap and had everybody start with me. That was so beautifully said, Janan. Thank you. And it's wild because if you were to look on Google Maps, Palestine isn't even listed as a country, right? And that's so heartbreaking. And it shows what a powerful resource this is, because this biography puts Palestine on the map for folks who might not know about it, and to help give students a sense of that geographical distance between Wisconsin and where is Palestine. There are maps actually included at the end of the biography book. And so not only can you as a classroom teacher or educator read a story, an ebook about Mahmoud's life, but at the end of it, you can actually find a map that shows the distance between Palestine and Wisconsin. So I just wanted to highlight that before passing it to David for your next question.
Thank you. So Jan, earlier you mentioned and discussed a little bit wanting to help dispel some of the myths and stereotypes that we see in traditional media about Palestinians and about Muslims. I think in the video, one way this comes through really nicely is showing the importance your father placed on family and on community. And at the very beginning, in the first scene, we see your father, this is a screen grab from it, we see him whispering something in Arabic to your newborn sister's ear. Can you just talk a little bit about what's going on there and maybe translate the meaning for us too?
Sure. So it is very traditional amongst all practicing Muslim families, regardless of, what country of origin they are, that when a child is born, this is a wonderful event. And we believe that it's very important for them to first begin by hearing the name of God, and because this is a recognition that the purpose for our creation is to be God's representatives on earth. And so this is symbolically shown by doing the call to prayer, the same call that you hear 5 times a day from minarets around the world. It's the same call. And so basically what it is, it's saying God is the greatest, God is the greatest. I bear witness that there is no God except the one God. I bear witness that there is no God except the one God. I bear witness that Muhammad is the final messenger of God. I bear witness that Muhammad is the final messenger of God. Come to prayer, come to prayer, come to success, come to success. God is the greatest, God is the greatest. There is no God except God. And so this is the way we believe that a person should begin their life, recognizing who God is, recognizing the name of God, and setting them on a course that they will hopefully conduct their life in a way where they encourage the love of God. They do things throughout their life to have an impact that pleases God, whether it's taking care of their neighbors, taking care of orphans, taking care of those in need, and really being a positive influence in society. And so it's kind of like, you start out on the right foot.
So in this scene, one of the things the video also mentions is like, this was a special moment for a number of reasons for you and your family, because typically you were not in the States, right? You were spread out geographically. Your father was working here. He would travel back and forth between Palestine and the US. And that was what his father had done too. For a lot of people, it's hard to really understand what that's like. So do you want to just touch on what it's like to be a family so geographically spread out?
Yeah, of course, I never met my grandfather because he died when my father was a teenager. but it was always very difficult because we didn't have any relatives here. We had some relatives in aunts and uncles that were in some of the other states, but we were one of the very few handful of Muslim families here, and one of very, very few Palestinian families that were here. So of course, you know, what was important was for us as a family to stick together. And I still remember my mother to this day, although she's very good in English, but with us she will only speak in Arabic in order to make sure that all of us are fluent in Arabic, and all of us, you know, are able to understand Arabic, read Arabic, speak in Arabic. And this was important. And my mother always cooked, you know, she would, when we would ask her, she would make the lasagna and the pizzas and whatever, but otherwise she was always cooking very traditional Palestinian meals. And so, and whenever there was an event, she would put on her Palestinian garb and her Palestinian dress. So we grew up as very, very proud Muslims and very proud Palestinians. And so when you're isolated that way, it's very, very important to find comfort within your individual family.
That's great. I'm so glad you mentioned the importance of Arabic to your family. The Arabic is, of course, important to all Muslims, and we're really excited with this resource to have the book available, in the digital book, in both English and in Arabic. And additionally, both of them have audiobook read-alongs as well. So if you go to the Arabic, for example, every page that has text has in the corner a little icon you click on, and then a reader can follow along and listen while the Arabic text is read, or in the case of the English book, the English text is read. So we're really great that it can be used by people learning Arabic, studying Arabic alongside the English version. But I'll pass it back to Muna right now.
I love that. I'm so excited about that feature because I know I never heard Arabic in the classroom. So that's such an awesome opportunity. So we know that another way a lot of people can connect to cultures and religions, aside from language, is thinking about holidays and celebrations. And one of the largest celebrations for Muslims is coming up in a couple weeks, and that's Ramadan, which is a month of fasting from sunrise to sunset. I know when I was younger, it was really hard to kind of not sit in the cafeteria because as a middle schooler, we weren't allowed to not sit in the cafeteria during lunchtime. But I had a librarian at my school kind of fight for me and say that I could sit in the library during lunchtime because I was fasting. And so I'm curious, what are some important ways that you think that educators can support learners and their families who participate in Ramadan, or even what's coming after Ramadan, and that is Eid, one of our largest celebrations. So what recommendations do you have for educators to support students?
Well, this is so great. And I'm glad that you had a librarian that would, you know, kind of go out on a limb for you, because I remember growing up and fasting Ramadan and entertaining my friends while they ate, you know. And many times some of the teachers and people at the school could not understand why a student would be fasting, and they had no clue what this fasting entailed. And so I remember them bringing me milk or bringing me water, just drink some water, just drink some milk, really having no concept about this. So this is just a wonderful opportunity for educators, for educators to go ahead and help these students and help educate the rest of the students. So I think that first of all, recognizing that this is a requirement in Islam. This is something that Muslims are required to do when they reach puberty. So although, you know, you don't have to fast when you are below that age, you find that so many Muslim kids and practicing Muslim families will start fasting at a very young age, just simply because it's such a special time and they want to be part of all of this experience. And so if a young student, you know, starts to feel hungry or breaks their fast or sneaks something to eat, that's okay, because they're really not required to fast anyhow. if they're feeling tired and, you know, they need to rest, please just accommodate them. And then for the older students as well, I think that trying to not plan certain, you know, school parties, or let's say, you know, field trips during the time that these students are fasting would really be something that would be helpful. And I think it shows care about all of the students, as well as, you know, if it's time for lunch, giving them the opportunity to either go to the library or go somewhere where they can rest. Again, this is a way to accommodate all students. And I think it's also the perfect opportunity to be able to share with the rest of the class, having the students talk about what Ramadan is for them, having them explain what they do and why they do that. This is an opportunity also to build global citizens. I think this is one of the issues that we often have, is that sometimes, you know, students in this country only know about themselves, or people like them, and more it's becoming a smaller world, and it's really important for students to be more aware, and that in itself builds a sense of celebration of diversity and acceptance, and really helps prevent some of the polarization that we're seeing. And then also for the holidays, you know, just talking and allowing the students to explain their holidays and how they celebrate their holidays. For example, one of the wonderful things here in the United States is that it's a very, very diverse Muslim community. So Muslims are coming really from all over the world. And then there's also Muslims that, you know, have been here for centuries, really. And so you find that when we have our holidays, those that come from immigrant families put on traditional clothes, and it just is a way, it's a showcasing the broad diversity of the Muslim community. And it's really a beautiful thing to see.
Thank you for sharing that. And to add on to the advice you gave about letting students talk about and celebrate their culture, I really recommend as a teacher to invite them to ahead of time and give it to them as an option. I've certainly, as a student here in the US, would have teachers kind of spring questions upon me in the middle of class unexpectedly. And that can be surprising. It can be off-putting. So be sure that it's the student's choice first and foremost, and that they have some time to prepare if they do elect to share more about their culture. I know that
can I also jump in, Mona, and just add to that too, is that I would also ask the educators to go ahead and even reach out to the parents. I remember with my children, especially when they were in elementary school, whenever it was Ramadan, whenever it was Eid, I had the teachers always inviting me to come in to read a book, to talk about it. I would bring, when it's Eid, I would bring in treats for the students, and so it gave them really an opportunity to share and to participate in all of that as well.
I love that. That's a great idea, bringing in families. And I know we have at least half the people on this call are Muslim. And so while you were a student, what were some of the things that your teachers did that really supported you? Feel free to put that in the chat. And if you're a teacher who's been kind of recognizing Islam, what are some of those strategies you've used to do so? So just know you're welcome to please share your experiences and your advice in the chat. So yeah, passing it to David for our last interview question before Q&A and wrap up.
Cool. You mentioned the great diversity of the Muslim community worldwide. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the community of Muslims in the Milwaukee area specifically, both when you were growing up and as your father was growing up, and then during his work establishing the first mosque open to all Muslims. And if you also want to mention then the importance of that mosque in the coming days, the coming holiday days.
Yeah, so my father growing up, as I mentioned, there were very, very few couple of Arab families. And what's interesting is that is particularly for the Palestinian families, the Muslim and Christian families are very, very close. We, endure the same kind of suffering, and you find that even for holidays, they share, with each other. And so when my father was here as a teenager, there were just a few individuals, his uncle, for example, and a few other individuals, and some of them were Christian, and they all looked out for each other, and they all, celebrated the holidays together. And then also then afterwards, my father came to know many in the Black Muslim community, a very wonderful, wonderful, warm community, spiritual community that welcomed him tremendously. And he would oftentimes share in the holidays with him. And when I was very, very young, I still remember also going to what was then in the, on the north side was Clara Muhammad School. It still exists there. And they used to have events and celebrations and within the small community. Later on, we started to meet individuals that came from the Indian subcontinent, particularly they were here as physicians, for example, some of the Pakistani doctors, Indian physicians that were Muslim. And and there were a few professors at that time. If you might know that for a period of time, immigration from many of these countries was prohibited in the United States. It was actually during President Kennedy's time that he opened up immigration from many of these other countries, and that allowed for more people to come in and more diverse populations as well to come in. And since that time, it's just been people from almost every corner of the earth. It's amazing, but I have met people from China, Muslims from China. I have met Muslims from Eastern Europe. I have met Muslims from all over Africa, from all over Asia. Also now we're seeing more and more Latinas and Latino Muslims. So it's just a growing population. And this is going to be also great because now we don't have just one mosque in Milwaukee. We have in greater Milwaukee, we have 9 mosques. And so during Ramadan, what you're going to find is that all of these mosques are packed. And if you have ever had an opportunity to watch Muslim prayer, and for those of you that are not familiar, I would encourage you to set up a time to go and visit one of the mosques just to see how Muslims pray. We stand shoulder to shoulder and we move as one unit. We bow and we prostrate to God. And so that develops a sense of community. And so regardless of where we're from, we're all standing together. We are participating in Ramadan. We're participating in the special prayers where thousands of people will be participating in Milwaukee during Ramadan. And sometimes, these prayers will go especially in the summer months, they now it's a little bit shorter, but in the summer months, they'll go till past midnight. We're all walking outside at that time together to get in our cars and go home. So that really that sense of community is so valuable. And I feel so blessed that my children have the opportunity to see that, because that was not something growing up that I really had the opportunity to experience. It was a wonderful community, but it was definitely a very small community. And it wasn't until much later when I was in college that we finally actually had a mosque.
We are going to be heading into Q&A now. And if you joined and you hadn't registered, please put your email in the chat right now so that you can be sure to get a follow-up email from us that has a link to the slide deck, a link to the recording, and where you can find all these great resources. So take a moment now to add your emails to the chat if you haven't shared your email with us yet. And I want to open it up to see if anyone has any questions for Janan while we have her here. If you have any questions about these resources and ideas for using them, the floor is yours. Even if you want to share about your own experiences, either working with Muslim students or being a Muslim student, the time is yours to ask some questions. You can put those in the chat or unmute yourself and ask.
I think some of the people, I was just looking at the chat, and you're going to share the video. This will be part of what is available, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, yeah. And I did want to let everyone know as well that, you know, I know that it might be a little bit difficult for those of you that are not in the Milwaukee area, but the Milwaukee Muslim Women's Coalition, and we collaborated on this project, but we run a resource center with books and information, and we always get teachers that come in looking for books that they can read to their students, for example. So we have a lending library with videos and items and cultural items as well. So you know, you can check out books, and if you have you want to discuss with your students or help them to understand better about Ramadan or about Eid or about, you know, hijab or some of these Muslim practices, we have a lot of resources available, and you can always call us as well. And even if you're in other parts of the state, we can work together to see about getting you some information if that's something that you need as well.
Thank you, Janan. Any last minute questions, you can please feel free to add those to the chat. Otherwise, I'm gonna pass it back to Michael.
Okay, thank you, Muna. Thank you, David. And thank you, maybe most of all, to Janan. Thank you for being here, for sharing your stories, your wisdom, your insights. This has been so valuable, and we really appreciate you taking the time today. Really, it's been incredible. To wrap things up today, first of all, if you are here live, we would love for you to take a quick survey to let us know what you thought of our webinar. We're going to put that in the chat for you. You can take 3 minutes and fill it out as soon as we wrap up today. This survey will also be emailed in the follow-up that Muna mentioned, where we're going to also send a copy of today's presentation slide deck and also some related resources that we think might be useful to you. Looking on your screen right now, you'll see that in addition to the amazing biography we discussed today, we have other biographies that you can check out and also other media collections that you can check out as well, all produced right here in Wisconsin, focused on Wisconsin issues, made by and for Wisconsin educators, for Wisconsin students. They're really great for anyone, of course, but we keep that Wisconsin place-based learning mentality as a priority in everything that we produce. In addition to the Wisconsin-based media, of course, PBS is a national company, and we collect media from all 50 states at a place called PBS Learning Media. Wisconsin.pbslearningmedia.org is the hub to check out resources from all over the country. Other states create really, really incredible educational media too. The last I heard, Learning Media had over 35,000 different resources. That spans all content areas, all grade levels, different languages, a lot of different ways that you can filter those resources to find exactly what you're looking for. So check out pbslearningmedia.org and find anything that might fit your educational needs. We would love for you to stay in touch with us at PBS Wisconsin Education. You can follow us on social media. You can also email and sign up for our listserv. That listserv is where you'll be the first to know whenever we release something new. The biography that we discussed today just came out last week. And if you had been on the email, you would have been one of the first people to know. How cool is that? So sign up for the listserv and you'll be the first to know all the hot new educational media that's coming out. And lastly, you can stay in touch with us personally. I've got Muna's email here, my email here, David's email here. We would love to field any follow-up questions that you might have, help you explore resources, or even give you some ideas about how you might use some of these resources in your classroom. We get to talk to a lot of different educators all over the state, so we would also be happy to give you some ideas of how other teachers have used these resources in ways that you might find really interesting and cool to test out in your own classroom. And with all that said, we're going to wrap up a little early today. Thank you all so much for tuning in, whether you're watching this live, whether you're watching this on YouTube. We really appreciate it. And a special thank you again to our guest, Janan. It has been so wonderful having you here today. We hope to see you all again soon. Be sure to follow up, check out the resource on your own time, and have a great day, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.